I did my observations for assessments at Patterson Elementary School in Mesa on Friday, November 20th from 8:30 until 9. I observed and discussed assessments with Mrs. Bleeker, who is a 5th grade teacher at Patterson. She is the teacher for the 5th grade's English Language Development, or ELD, students. Only a couple of the students in the class are still part of the ELD program, but a majority of the rest of the students have just recently switched out of the program. During my observation, Mrs. Bleeker did her normal morning routine, checking attendance and collecting lunch money. They also spent a couple minutes listening to the morning announcements and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, since my observation took place first thing in the morning. Once all that was finished, it was time for the students to take their weekly phonics assessment. Instead of just handing the students the assessment and hoping they do their best, Mrs. Bleeker spent about 5 minutes reviewing with the students. In the review, the class went over every word for that week and its meaning so it would be fresh in their minds. She gave each student the same assessment. It had sentences that were already formed, but there was a word missing, and the students had to pick the correct phonics word in order to complete the sentence. After the students finished, they turned their papers into a basket and worked on quiet work till it was time to go to PE. While the students were gone at PE, Mrs. Bleeker and I were able to sit down and discuss her reasoning behind her assessment process. From our discussion, it was clear that with this group of students, having differentiated instruction is extremely important. And although the assessment was the same for every student, she said she changes up how she reviews each week in order to help reach the needs of her students. The basic idea of differentiation is that the teacher finds out students' needs and readiness before starting instruction so they can use this information to tailor or differentiate instruction for them. From Obie and Sapp. She said she uses the results from the week before to know if she needs to change up how she works with the phonics words for the next week. If everyone understands, then the activity she is doing throughout the week would be working. Understanding student preferences about types of assignments can help the teacher work from their strengths to address their needs. Also from Obie and Sapp, page 155. Along with that, if the students do poorly on the assessment, then perhaps she needs to take a look at how she's teaching the information throughout the week. Either way, she uses the information from the assessment to help her be a better teacher so her students have a better chance at being successful. During our discussion, we talked about standardized tests briefly. With the changing of standards and new tests being made, Ms. Bleeker and I talked about what should be included in standardized tests. We both came to an agreement that standardized tests are difficult because they are not able to reach every student. For example, her students that struggle with English have an even more difficult time with standardized tests because they may not understand what the question is asking. Standardized tests are often biased, teacher-made tests are often very unreliable, and assessment strategies are often artificial. From Obie and Sapp, page 154. She believes there needs to be a set of standardized tests that meet every student's needs and are asking the students to do the same work without any bias. While she uses a lot of assessments that come as part of her workbooks, she likes to use other forms of assessments than just tests or quizzes. Whether it is grading a group project, looking over nightly homework, or simply observing them as they are learning new information, Mrs. Bleeker is constantly checking on her students' understanding of what they have learned. Teachers' assessment practices help in determining the level of performance of students as well as the effectiveness of educational programming. Obie and Sapp, page 154. Although there are several different ways to assess students, it depends on what the teacher is looking for in order to determine which route is the best to take. It was great to be able to observe an assessment taking place in a classroom, even if it was just a weekly assessment and not a standardized assessment. Being able to discuss with the teacher how she does her assessments and what she uses them for was very informative. As a future teacher, I hope to use these practices in my own classroom to help ensure my students learn the most from each class session.